Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is June the 12th, 2024. It has been 3,789 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 113 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 110 days since Russia expanded its war aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Tuesday and Wednesday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. There are minor map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. Our assessment that Russia's multi-day pause in significant Shahed-136 one-way drone and missile attacks indicated that a large-scale attack targeting Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure was imminent was regrettably accurate. 2. We maintain that Russia's ongoing spring-summer offensive failed to achieve any of its operational goals after 52 days, and we further assess that Russian combat potential is declining. 3. The sharp increase in aggressive acts by the Russian Federation directed at the NATO alliance and its member nations is a direct result of the failed policy of de-escalation and excessive fear of Moscow's tactical nuclear threats. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 4. Russia is setting conditions to commit further acts of aggression in Europe. 5. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 2 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court on March 5th. 6. The quantity of artillery ammunition available to Ukrainian frontline units continues to increase and should reach a level sufficient to stabilize their defensive lines throughout the theater by the end of June. 7. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs is encouraging escalation. 8. Autocrat Putin has started the largest purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense, led by the FSB, since Joseph Stalin's 1936 to 1938 purge. 9. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. On the night of June the 11th and the 12th, Russia launched 4 Kh-101 or 555 cruise missiles, 1 Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile, 1 Kh-47M2 Kinzhal air-launched ballistic missile, and 24 Shahed-136 one-way drones at Ukraine. Ukrainian air defense intercepted all but the Iskander-M SRBM, which was launched from occupied Crimea and struck the Kyiv region. The Polish Air Force scrambled F-16 fighters in response to the Russian attack, and the United States Air Force KC-136 Strata tanker was on station between Lublin and Helm, Poland. There were no violations of NATO airspace. Most of the missiles and drones targeted the Kyiv region, with 1 person injured by falling debris. Officials reported that a missile had hit an industrial complex, and there was a large fire. In the Kharkiv Oblast, unrelated to today's drone and missile attacks, an S-300 anti-aircraft missile used for ground attack struck near the settlement of Novopokrovka, killing one and wounding another. It was only the second use of an S-300 for a ground attack since June 1st. Russian forces shelled the village of Stary Saltiv on the west bank of the Oskil reservoir, killing one civilian when their car was hit. The number of people wounded on Monday by the VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, bombing of the city of Kharkiv was reduced by 1, while the number of people wounded in Derhachi was increased by 1. In the Donetsk Oblast, a Russian attack on Pokrovsk wounded 2 civilians. The VKS bombed Kostiantynivka with MPK glide bombs, damaging 16 apartment buildings and wounding 5 people. Russia attacked 18 villages and settlements and the cities of Kherson and Bereslav in the Kherson Oblast. Homes, a shopping mall and critical civilian infrastructure were damaged, and 3 civilians were injured in the attacks. Serhiy Lysak, head of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast Military Administration, reported 2 Russian cruise missiles were shot down yesterday over Dnipro before the larger attack. There was minimal damage, with 1 pregnant woman lightly injured. Russia also shelled Nikopol, wounding an 87-year-old woman who is in hospital. United Nations Human Rights Watch confirmed that in May Russia attacked 24 power plants and major electrical substations and 6 areas of civilian railroad infrastructure. The report stated, quote, "As a result of such attacks, the civilian population suffers the most." Here is today's action report. Russia's spring-summer offensive is on its 53rd day, with 100 assaults carried out on Monday and 87 through Tuesday evening. Through June the 10th, the 7-day moving average for attacks dropped to 97, down 29% from the May the 17th peak of 136. A clear bell curve has formed on the 7-day moving average, signaling the current Russian offensive has peaked. In the past 24 hours, Russia made tactical gains in Novo-Alexandrivka and marginal gains northeast of Novopokrovsk. Along the rest of the line of conflict, Russia and Ukraine traded marginal advances in several locations. The lack of significant changes for either combatant since May the 17th, when the Russian northern Kharkiv offensive reached its furthest advance, is another signal that the current Russian offensive is approaching its conclusion. After aspiring dentist and Colonel General Ramzan Dondon Kadyrov revealed the action of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance units on the Sumy border, activity dropped significantly. In the last 24 hours, Russian artillery and drone units only carried out 21 fire missions along the border region, using 55 artillery rounds, mortars, rockets and one-way drones. Now for the assessment of the day from our analyst team. Ukraine's new ability to strike targets in Russia within the 1991 borders, the improving ammunition situation, the acceleration of mobilization, and Russia's growing mobility problems indicate that the early spring crisis along the front lines has passed. Russia can still make tactical gains and will continue its attempts to achieve operational success through the summer. Russia's personnel issue isn't related to shortages, but the declining combat power each frontline soldier has. Many receive less than 2 weeks of training before being deployed to the front lines. There aren't any non-commissioned officers to instill additional training or discipline, and Mobics join military units with a caste system that puts them 1 step above foreign contract soldiers and 2 steps above penal units. The tactics adopted by the Russian Ministry of Defense closely resemble those of the defunct private military company Wagner Group. The attacks are comprised of repeated assaults of light infantry squads and platoons, marginally supported by armor and artillery, with no regard for the preservation of force. Under the command of Colonel General Alexander Syrsky, Ukrainian forces have adopted a strategy of trading territory for time, carrying out increasingly well-planned retrograde operations to channel Russian troops into kill boxes and using active defense to capitalize on any mistake. Syrsky set a minimum goal of losing 1 Ukrainian soldier for 6 Russians, And all evidence indicates that not only has that been achieved since March, but it is closer to 8-1 theater-wide. Highlighting how Russia is using mass over quality, the Defense Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom confirmed our earlier assessment that the use of Chechen forces in frontline combat is an act of, quote, desperation that shows the, quote, resource strain within the Russian military. The situation will remain difficult through the rest of 2024, but barring a major unforeseen military, political or geopolitical event, it will steadily improve. In our assessment, by continuing the Valery Gerasimov doctrine of attacking everywhere at the same time with everything, instead of concentrating available combat power in one or two areas of operation, Moscow squandered its opportunity to exploit the April breakthroughs of Ukrainian defenses. In hindsight, our glum assessments in March 2024 about Ukraine's ability to hold back Russian troops after the loss of Avdiivka were unfounded. Almost 2 years ago, we included in our daily assessment that Valery Gerasimov was one of the best allies of Ukraine due to his incompetence and his blind eye to corruption. In 2024, little has changed. Now, let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Liptsi-Vovchansk area of operation, or AO. Fighting continued in Vovchansk, with Russian and Ukrainian sources reporting that Ukraine holds the battlefield initiative. In the northeastern part of the settlement, Russian troops were pushed back further. The 71st Yaga Brigade continued drone strikes in the northern part of Vovchansk, obliterating a home Russian troops were occupying. In the northwestern part, the situation is more difficult, with house-to-house fighting continuing. Mutual fighting was ongoing in Hlyboke, where Ukrainian forces advanced 400 meters in the last 24 hours. In the Belgorod region of Russia, drone operators with the 71st destroyed a 2S-1 Gvozdika 122 self-propelled howitzer. Robert Madar Brovdi, commander of the Birds of Madar drone unit, reported that in the last 10 days the unit had destroyed 100 Russian targets. A 24-minute video, complete with Jaga Jaga and Padaboom, confirmed the 100 strikes. We link to the video in our almost daily situation report. There's more information on how to become a subscriber for just $5 a month in the podcast description. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces attempted to advance in the direction of Sinkivka, Peshchane and Berestove without success. Russian collaborator and the former major of Kupiansk, Gennady Matsegora, died of his injuries after being shot in Staroyskil over the weekend. Matsegora was transferred to Moscow for medical treatment, but never regained consciousness. In the Svatovo AO of the Luhansk Oblast, positional fighting was ongoing west of occupied Novovodyane in the direction of Druzhelyubivka and Grekivka. In the Kremenna AO, Russian forces continued their attempts to advance in the direction of Nevske and launched a significant attack toward Terny. Neither assault was successful. Fighting also continued in the Serebryanka forest. Southeast of Bilogorivka, a Ukrainian drone observed a lone Russian soldier digging a trench with a shovel in the chalk waste. Once the Russian soldier realized he had been spotted, he sat down, made the sign of the cross, and waited for the drone-delivered AED to land on him. In the occupied region of the Luhansk Oblast, rockets fired by HIMARS destroyed a Russian Panzer S-1 air defense system, as well as command and support vehicles. The system exploded catastrophically, and almost indistinguishable body parts and the boots of Russian soldiers were strewn across the site. We link to a video showing the aftermath. Let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Seversk AO, Russian forces continued their attacks in the direction of Verkhnyokamyensk from Zolotarivka with no change in the situation. after consolidating earlier gains, Russian troops tried to advance southeast of the village of Vyimka without success. In the Kostiantynivka AO, Russian forces continued their pause in the eastern edge of Kalinivka and carried out a single assault in the canal district of Chasiv Yar. There were no new advances recorded. Fighting also continued on the western edges of Ivanivske, with Operational Command East denying Russian reports that the settlement was captured. The drone operators with the Ukrainian 93rd Mechanized Brigade wiped out a supply convoy west of Rote on the Russian-controlled M03 highway. On the southern edge of Bakhmut, a Russian UAZ-452 Lov was hit by a drone while Russian troops were unloading ammunition. There are a lot of videos in today's report, and we'll link to all of them in the sitrap. Fighting continued east of Klishchiivka and east and southeast of Andriivka, with no change in the situation. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces continued intense attacks in the Avdiivka AO, trying to convert the tactical gains of almost 4 months ago into an operational success. The situation deteriorated in Novo-Alexandrivka, where Ukrainian forces were forced to fall back to the western third of the settlement. Russian forces also made a small advance along the railroad grade in the direction of Progress. Heavy fighting continued west of Yevhenivka and Sokil, and Russian forces made additional marginal gains northeast of Novopokrovsk, where the situation became very difficult. Russian forces were also attempting to advance toward Novoselivka Persha. Members of the Ukrainian 110th Mechanized Brigade shot down a Russian Su-25 Frogfoot ground attack aircraft and included a video to prove it. Russian mercenary Melblogovo Gonzo reported fighting continued in the area of Karlivka. In occupied Komunarivka, a Russian Buk M2 air defense system was destroyed by a Ukrainian drone strike. The system was in transit in the middle of the village and stopped for unknown reasons less than 400 meters from a school. Russian troops abandoned the burning air defense system. Fighting continued in the Vuhledar AO, with Russian forces making another unsuccessful attempt to advance further into Krasnohorivka. Fighting continued east of Georgiivka and the eastern part of Paraskoviivka, with no change in the situation. On the southwest edge of Novomikhailivka, a Russian MTLB was finished off by a Ukrainian drone strike after an earlier hit. The crew was either killed or abandoned the armored fighting vehicle, leaving it running in a tight circle. By the time the Ukrainian drone finished it off, it had dug a deep hole. We'll link to the video, and based on the geolocation, we recorded a small Ukrainian advance and adjusted the war map. In the Gulyai-Pole AO of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, Russian forces probed Ukrainian defenses south of the village of Chervone, suffered losses and returned to their defensive positions. In the Orikhiv AO, there was only positional fighting in the areas of Malatokmachka, Vodyane and Novoprokopivka, and the remains of Robotine. Russian forces also attempted to advance in the direction of Sherbaki. Near occupied Inzhenerne, a Ukrainian drone destroyed a Strela-10 air defense system. In the Kherson AO, a Ukrainian woman from occupied Oleshki crossed through the gray zone in Dachi and started to cross the left bank section of the Antonivsky Bridge. When a drone approached, she waved her Ukrainian passport, not knowing if it was a Russian or Ukrainian drone. It was Ukrainian, and she was rescued using a boat to cross the Dnipro River to free Ukraine. Russian forces shared a video of a Mobik being duct-taped to a tree in the forests near occupied Oleshki as punishment. Andrei Yelisenko was upset that he would have to buy his equipment with his own money. Commanders ordered him not to complain about the issue, but he went above their heads. While he was tied up, there was a Ukrainian artillery strike, which Yelisenko somehow survived. The Russian Ministry of Defense released a video showing a Lancet one-way drone destroying a Ukrainian Su-25 at Dovgintsevo Air Base in Kryvyi Rih, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. The strike was 70 kilometers from the known line of conflict.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Ukraine continues to set conditions to increase the number of successful drone strikes and the introduction of F-16 fighter planes, with another ATACMS missile strike likely destroying another S-400 battery in occupied Crimea. The military area Onyx, north of Kachik Lake in occupied Crimea, was one of the areas targeted. NASA Fire Information for Resource Management showed numerous thermal anomalies at the military installation. Russian occupiers made their traditional claim of all missiles intercepted. Forced to use the Kerch Bridge for military logistics, Russian occupiers are rapidly building up defenses against uncrewed surface vessels, increasing the number of grouped barges blocking parts of the Kerch Strait to 11 and adding a layer of anti-USV booms. Everything is going to plan in Putin's 3-day special military operation. Here is my theater-wide update, and there's a lot to cover. I won't be able to get to everything in today's podcast, but you can subscribe to the Sitrap or check out our social media channels for additional updates. The Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Colonel Vadim Sukharevsky, has been appointed as the first commander of the Forces of Unmanned Systems. The command was created as a new branch of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and is the first dedicated military branch for uncrewed warfare in the world. Sukharevsky said that Ukraine had found an alternative to Starlink internet terminals and was preparing to implement them in the Mahura Mach 5 Sea Baby uncrewed surface vessels. Quote, "An alternative exists, dialogue is ongoing, and in the near future we expect a positive outcome in this dialogue." After the Kremlin said it would never attend the Ukrainian Peace Summit hosted by Switzerland, even if invited, and then complained it didn't get an invite, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov derided the upcoming confab, saying, quote, "They will discuss Zelensky's worthless and dead-end peace formula." Speaking in the German Bundestag with President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky present, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, called for the start of negotiations for Ukraine's accession to the EU. The only nation blocking the advancement is Hungary, which will take over the presidency of the Council of the EU on July the 1st. Debate in the EU Council was supposed to start on June the 12th, but has been delayed by a week. The chairman of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Michael McCaul, said that the ban on ATACMS strikes on Russian territory is contrary to the intent of Congress and called on the Biden administration to lift the restriction. The German defense company Rheinmetall reported that an agreement with Ukraine has been signed to start production of the Lynx infantry fighting vehicle before the end of 2024. Rheinmetall also confirmed that its Ukrainian repair facility was officially opened. The site provides maintenance and repair to the Marder 1A3 IFV, Leopard 1A5, Leopard 2 and Stridswagen 122 main battle tanks. President Zelensky was accompanied by the Federal Minister of Defense of Germany, Boris Pistorius, on a visit to the German 21st Surface-to-Air Missile Group in Zanitz, Germany. Zelensky wrote on Twitter, also known as X, quote, "We saw the Patriot battery that will be transferred to Ukraine and met with Ukrainian warriors who are training to operate it. We are doing our utmost to keep Russian terror out of Ukrainian skies." Additionally, Germany announced it would provide Ukraine with 100 missiles for the Patriot air defense system, hundreds of UAVs, assault rifles, and $108 million for the medical sector. Estonia announced it was providing Ukraine with a new military aid package that includes Mistral man-portable air defense systems. Von der Leyen announced that the EU will finally transfer the first $1.6 billion in profits from frozen Russian assets to Ukraine in July. 90% of the funds will be for defense spending and 10% for reconstruction. The New York Times reported that the United States will redeploy a Patriot air defense battery from Poland to the armed forces of Ukraine. The exact timing of the transfer was not disclosed, with the US officials saying it could be, quote, in the next several days. The Associated Press reported that President Joe Biden had approved the transfer. Norway announced it would provide Ukraine with 125 Patriot interceptors and allocated $134 million for a Netherlands-led initiative to purchase a seventh full Patriot battery. The Netherlands announced it would provide 3 Patriot MIM-104 launchers and a radar to Ukraine. Officials were asking other nations to provide the command module, the portable power generator, and additional launchers to complete the battery. Amsterdam also said it would provide almost $65 million to support the production of Ukrainian aerial and naval drones. There is a lot more in today's sitrep, but that's all the time I have. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.